Hey everybody, welcome back to 1 Minute Walking Tours, and Jonathan here. We're still here in GreenWood Cemetery talking about some of the most famous or infamous graves and memorials here in the cemetery, and we're here to talk about this mausoleum from a man named John Anderson. Now, John Anderson was a prosperous businessman. He owned a tobacco store, so you would say he was a tobacconist, obviously, on what was then the fashionable area of Broadway, and that would have been, wait a second, John Anderson. This is tricky. We're on a very steep hill on, strangely enough, I don't know if you can read that, Highlands Avenue. GreenWood, as I said, is actually on the highest part of Long Island. So I'm gonna actually get up here and into the shade. Also show some things here. And you can see his beautiful view for all eternity. I think it's a little blown out, but you can see out into the harbor. You can see into Manhattan. This would have been a clear view at the time he was buried or interred, and that he was clearly here in 1864 at the height of the American Civil War. And Anderson was a staunch believer in union, and he has federal style columns to represent his belief in the federal government. And I believe he has some statues here representing the Republic, idea of the Republic. And he also has the Gospel of Jesus Christ, and also very fragile at this point, made out of marble, beautiful marble sculptures. Now, John Anderson actually dies in Paris in 1864, probably from an infection, something along the lines of pneumonia. And his body is brought back to New York, his hometown, by 1861. Brooklyn is still, of course, its own city, but the place to be interred is obviously here in the beauty of GreenWood. Now, John Anderson had political ambitions, and he was well connected. His tobacco store down on Broadway had very famous patrons. You had James Fenimore Cooper, America's first novelist. You had Edgar Allan Poe. You had soldier, politician, future president Zachary Taylor, who would come to his store. And Taylor once told Anderson that tobacco was the solace of the soldier. And Anderson, ever the good businessman, packaged a semi-waterproof or water-resistant tobacco product, which he called the soldier's solace. And it was wax paper that had been glued together, and there was tobacco inside. And Zachary Taylor had that actually issued to his men. So he was a very good businessman. And in a way to improve his already bustling business, he tried to do what they had done in Europe, and that was take an all-male business, and that's tobacco. Women, of course, went to the back door and bought as many cigarettes as they could fist and smoked them and went home. So what Anderson did was he found the loveliest woman he could hire and had her work at the counter. Now, this was done in Paris, this was done in London, a way to attract men and outrage women. This was, of course, the best thing to do for business, and he hired a woman named Mary Rogers. Mary Rogers is a dark-complected, dark hair, lovely smoky eyes. They said she was called the Beautiful Cigar Girl. Now, she attracted a lot of business, a lot of press, a lot of outrage from women and so forth, everything you could possibly want for a business in the early 19th century. So she disappeared for a few weeks, and everyone wondered what happened to her. Many people believed it was a publicity stunt, and it probably was. She reappeared, and everyone crushed the store with their presence, and they didn't really know what to do. She fainted, she disappeared for a couple of days, and she reappeared, and everyone said, bah, publicity stunt. Rogers disappears again. This time seems like she's not coming back, and when her body is found floating in the Hudson River, everyone really knows she's not coming back. So she's found in the Hudson River in between New York. Well, there's no way to point to the Hudson River from Brooklyn, but you get the idea. She's found floating pretty much on the line between New York and New Jersey. Now, New Yorkers would take the ferry, this is in the 1840s, over to Hoboken, to Elysian Fields. It was actually a place where they would play baseball. And people would have lemonade, drink from the spring waters. Not being in the city essentially is what you did. People rode out, they took her body back, and a hasty postmortem was performed on this very hot day. And she had been in the water for hours. And this is New York City's first celebrity murder mystery, if you will. Now, a hasty postmortem is performed, as I said. She had been strangled to death. She had been bruised. Bones in her face and hands had been broken. Her bonnet had been tied with what they said was a sailor's knot. She's buried. There's a very fast inquest. The body will eventually be transported back to New York City, where there's yet another inquest. And everybody starts to gather around this idea of who had killed the beautiful cigar girl. Now, her employer, this poor guy, John Anderson, is immediately suspect. What was his relationship to the beautiful cigar girl? What was his relationship to her mother and her siblings? Why had he employed her? They had lived in Lyme, Connecticut, and suddenly now she's living in Lower Manhattan. She's working at this cigar store. So needless to say, this suspicion falls over him, and his business starts to falter, and eventually he has to go to Europe, pick up the cigar business there, and his dreams of politics die away, and eventually they die away with Zachary Taylor. He's only president for about a month anyway. I think. After the Mexican War, he tries to end slavery. Doesn't go well for him because he dies. Anderson here actually dies in Paris, and he is overwhelmed towards the end of his life with beliefs that Mary Rogers' body has actually come back from the grave, is haunting him. Now, I could point to a number of books and say, if you're interested in the first spectacular, fantastic, unsolved murder mystery of New York City, but that would be boring. You know what would be more exciting? If you knew that the world's first fictional detective, Pierre Gustave Dupin, the creation of Edgar Allan Poe, was actually set on the case by Poe himself. Poe figured out the case. He figured out how Mary Rogers had died and her body had been disposed of. At least that's what he felt. So in his short story, The Mystery of Marie Roger, he sets it in Paris. Her body is found floating in the Seine. He explains in his mind how the murder and mystery of Mary Rogers happened. So in that short story, you can hear all of the facts through Poe's words. Very exciting. So in the end, all poor John Rogers had was this spectacular tomb, this beautiful view, and a footnote in history. So thanks for joining me here on 1 Minute Walking Tours. Please, as you know, we now have a YouTube, so new, it has that new YouTube smell. Follow the link below. Please like and subscribe. That will help the channel. Find new viewers, and we'll do new things, go new places together. Stay safe.